Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I don't know if you're expecting another video from me quite so soon, but I am here and I have a stack of books to talk to you about. These are the books that I read in October and I'm so excited to share with you about them because if you've been watching my vlogs, I've been doing like a series of mid-month, which not quite in the middle of the month, but I've been doing a series of kind of weekend vlogs. And so I've told you a little bit about my real-time thoughts while I was reading the book and also when I finished reading the book. But maybe you're not here for vlogs, you're just more for give me one video where you talk about all the books, then that's this video. And I'm going to talk about them in no particular order other than this is how they were listed in my reading journal in my TBR list. And I know you haven't heard me talk about my reading journal all year. That's because for a long time I wasn't really keeping up with it. But I don't want to jinx it, but I want to say that I'm back. I'm back to all things bookish, all things booktube. I'm back. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here. But you don't want to hear me wax on about my intentions. You want to hear about the books. So, first book that was on my TBR was this book that we read for the Run Write Reads book club. And shameless plug here, if you're not familiar with the Run Write Reads book club, that is the book club that I organize and run. Have not been doing it so great in the last year or so, but we have continued to read. We've continued to read. All the other things might not be perfect, but we've been reading really incredible books from the Caribbean every month. This year we did something just a little bit different in that we alternated books that were written by authors who were born in the Caribbean with authors whose parents were born in the Caribbean. So we did Children of the Caribbean interspersed every other month this year. This, however, is one of the authors who was born in the Caribbean and remained in the Caribbean. Earl Lovelace is 89 years old. He's still alive in Trinidad. And so this book is set in maybe the 1970s thereabouts. And we're focusing on a community called Calvary Hill. And you can take that biblical reference any way you want to interpret it. But this book is not about religion so much. It is more about masquerades. It's about the carnival spirit and people wanting to embody that self, that dominant persona that they adopt at carnival time and how it compares with the rest of their lives. So in this book, we're following some people. They're not related. They all live in very close proximity to each other in a yard. Think like a tenement situation. Because they have been poor and they've come from poor families, their poverty has become a part of their identity. So belonging to this hill, belonging to this yard is also how you identify. And so in this book, Earl Lovelace talks a little bit about the different ways that people could choose to leave this identity behind. And so we focus on a character who is a musician and what it means for him to get his music popularized. What are some of the things that he may have to leave behind in order to gain more widespread acceptance? We also see marriage as a vehicle for escape, especially for a young woman, a young girl who may not have an opportunity to pursue like academic scholarship, but because of her looks, because of her youth, she is attractive to men who can give her an opportunity to leave this identity behind. And of course, because not everybody leaves the community, we also focus a lot on what it means to belong. What are some of the compromises that people make in order to feel like they belong? This was a wonderful read. Like I said, it's set in Trinidad in the 1970s. The author does have a little bit of that male gaze. So a lot of the people that we focus on in the book are men. But we also have some quiet but really powerful women who operate behind the scenes, and we can see the impact of their actions even if we don't necessarily get their perspectives. So I really, really love this book and highly recommend it. We read it for the Run Write Reads book club. If you want to join the book club, in November, we're going to be reading Zammy, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre Lorde. So you can join in and we discuss the book at the end of the month. Another book that I reread for the book club, and the reason that I reread this one is, number one, it's a favorite of mine. I've read it a few times, but we had it scheduled for the book club earlier in the year and other things were happening. We didn't get a chance to discuss it. So we didn't get a chance to discuss it at the time when it was scheduled. So I had a discussion with one of our subscribers, Alba from Sierra. Hi, Alba. I know you're watching. So I reread this book just to prepare for our discussion, and I love this book. So this story has two beginnings. We're following a character named Hortense who grows up in Jamaica and is able to leave Jamaica and go to England when she's a young adult. And we get a little of the story about her beginnings and the push to leave. Also, why there's nothing kind of anchoring her back in Jamaica. And we also get the origins of the people in England, the people who she will reconnect with, and also the people who she will meet when she gets to England. What are their origins? What are their stories? So we have a young woman named Queenie, who is a white woman who is raised in England, and we see the intersection of Queenie and Hortense's life. We also have a couple of male characters who bridge these two women. So we get Gilbert's story as well as Michael. Is it Michael? Two Jamaican men who are in England, and each one of them feels like a really well-formed character. Andrea Levy does the switching back and forth between perspectives really, really well. So we get flashbacks, we get present time, we get the intersection of experiences. We're able to focus a little bit on the immigration story of that Windrush generation, the people who came to England in the mid 1900s, some of them because they wanted to fight for the mother country. This was before Jamaica gained independence from the colonialism. So a little bit of focus on people who are raised to consider themselves to be part of the British Commonwealth, and the shell shock, the crashing realization when they arrive in the mother country and realize that mother is not who they hoped that she would be. So this is hilarious, but it's also really thought-provoking, and I highly, highly recommend this book. If you haven't read Andrea Levy, this is great. Her other book that I have read is Love Song, also really great, but this one's my favorite. I have favorites. I also picked up Between Two Kingdoms by Sulika Jawad. The publishers had sent this to me some time ago, and it just took me a long time to get around to it. I'm really sorry about that because I really, really enjoyed this one. Sulika Jawad is a young woman who was raised in the United States, I think born and raised in the United States, but her father is, I forget now where he's from. I think it's Tunisia. And she is at the cusp of starting her own life. She's just graduated from college. She's in New York for an internship. It doesn't go the way she wants, so she almost on a whim decides to head to Europe to pursue a different path. And it's one of those things that's afforded to young people, and it should be, as you try to figure out what you want to do with your life. But in the middle of that, she gets the startling diagnosis of a chronic illness, and she has to return to the United States to be treated. And so this is a memoir of what life is like, both before the interruption, during the interruption, and even after she tries to put the pieces back together, how her relationships change under the weight of this illness, and whether or not some of the relationships that she starts can actually go with her on the other side of figuring out life after illness. So in this one, I like how she connects the experience of being ill with other ways that some of those same symptoms could be experienced. So she connects with other people who are having some of the same experiences, but for different reasons. So like she connects with someone who is in solitary confinement in prison because the person is on death row. And it's a different kind of a death sentence, right? When you're not sure whether or not you'll be able to escape it. And so I like the connections that she forges and how she follows up with those relationships towards the end of the book. Really, really stunning read. So yeah, definitely highly recommend this one as well. But I recommend almost all the books that I read because listen, if I don't really like the book, I'm going to stop reading it. So generally when I finish a book, it's because I really enjoyed it. I also picked up The Teacher by Frida McFadden. I've been hearing about this author for a while. This is my first time reading anything from her. And this one's a little bit different because it's a thriller. And so, you just don't know what the book is going to be about until you read it. And you have to read it to the end to figure out, do you like all the twists and turns? Do you like all the reveals as they come up? So there's a storyline in here. And because it's a thriller, I don't want to tell you too much about it. So it's set in a high school. So we're following a husband and wife who are both teachers in the same high school, as well as we focus a little bit on some of their students and the interaction that these individuals, the couple, that they have with each other, but also that they have with their students. Of course, it's a thriller, so a crime is committed, and you as the reader have to figure out who you think is responsible or who is more responsible. And you're never really sure what's going to happen, of course, until the final few pages. I like this enough. I think I may have mentioned before, there's a storyline in here that I did not care for. And I was just so far into the story that I didn't want to abandon it. But that storyline is difficult for me to read. It's just difficult for me to read and appreciate the book otherwise. So if that had been different, I think my enjoyment of the book would have been much better. So this is probably my lowest rating. This might be my lowest rating. I don't know. We'll come back to that. I'm not rating the books really. Aside from that, I read a couple of electronic books. I read William Shakespeare's The Tragedy of Macbeth. This was also a reread for me. I've read Macbeth a few times. This time I read it with my buddies Columbus and Rosalie, and I enjoy the books that I buddy read. I enjoy them immensely. Way more than if I just read it by myself, because you have real-time interactions, real-time discussion with other people who are having, you know, the same text in front of them and may have different reactions. But also what I really like about buddy reads is how sometimes we connect what we're reading to other pieces of literature, but also our own individual experiences. So this was a fantastic read. You know the story of Macbeth. It is a husband and wife who are tempted into a life of crime to fulfill their own political ambitions, and how it weighs on them, and the consultation that they make with the spirits, and what happens when the spirits maybe lead them astray. Shakespeare's a master storyteller, so there are twists and turns and little reveals that you're not sure how those things are going to work out. Like there's a section of the story, there's a section of the play where he kind of tells you how the story is going to end. And then it happens in a very unexpected way. So I like that. So I read that online on Project Gutenberg, even though I have physical copies of Macbeth. But while I'm reading and lugging some of these books, some of these physical books around, I like to know that I have a book that I can just read on my phone. So if I'm somewhere and I don't have a physical book in my hand, I could always open my phone and just read something. And so that's what Macbeth was for me this time. I also paired it with some Spark Notes that gave a little bit of backstory. And I enjoyed that too. The next book that I read was The Day I Fell Off My Island by Yvonne Bailey Smith, who, if you're not familiar, is the mother of Zadie Smith. You know, the author who gave us White Teeth and Swing Time and all of that. So Yvonne Bailey Smith's novel was on the Run Right Reads book club selection earlier this year. The main character in The Day I Fell Off My Island is Erna, a young girl growing up in Jamaica. And her mother has her when she's very young. Her mother also has other children and then proceeds to leave them for the grandmother to raise them while she goes off to work. A lot of the early parts of the book follow Erna's life growing up in rural Jamaica with her grandmother and her siblings, but also her uncles and aunts who are living in the same household. So there's a huge family. There's no lack of connection, but she still has this really close connection with her grandmother. So a lot of that part of the story focuses on the relationship between Erna and her grandmother. I like that. I like this part of the book, even though it felt like it wasn't very edited. You know how sometimes you get a book and it doesn't feel like an author wrote it. It feels like an editor wrote it, because you feel like you can see the cuts that the editor made. This didn't feel like that, and I love that. I felt like this part of the book especially was Yvonne Bailey Smith's just writing and them just putting it to publish. I loved it. It's a story that centers on life in rural Jamaica, and a lot of it was very familiar because I also grew up in rural Jamaica. So I love that part of the book. Eventually she leaves Jamaica and goes to England, and we focus on that next chapter in her life. I like the book. I like the book a lot. I have not yet discussed it with the book club, so I'm going to come back when I've done that and make a full review video. For now, The Day I Fell Off My Island by Yvonne Bailey Smith, I hope more people will read it. I loved it, and I'd love to discuss it with you if you pick it up. Aside from that, I also picked up Acts of Forgiveness by Maura Cheeks, and this one also felt like it wasn't very edited, which is not a bad thing. I hope you understand. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. This one is also a debut novel, and Maura Cheeks is impressive as a writer. She gives us a lot of story in here. So on the synopsis, it tells us that the book is about what happens in African American life when the first female president of the United States tries to pass this Forgiveness Act, which would seek to give reparations to people who could trace their ancestry to enslaved Americans. That is what the book is supposed to be about, but it takes a while to get there. A lot of the first part of the book is just leading up to it, showing the relationship between our main character, Willie Revel, and the woman who becomes that president, and also about her family and why this Forgiveness Act is so important to them. The focus of this story is about family history and seeking to prove your identity, what that looks like when you have to prove who you are to other people, but also when you have to prove who you are to yourself. I love that some of the characters in this book are writers, female writers, and there's even a section where we focus on the life of Phyllis Wheatley, who was the first African-American poet, I think, to be published in the United States, and I don't know too much about her, but I want to study that. So I love this book, and the last few pages of this book had me in tears because it spoke to me. So this is a high rating. This was a high rating, probably an unexpected high rating, because I had started this book a couple of times and put it aside because, like I said, it didn't feel like it was the story that was promised. Which is why I tell you, don't read book synopses. Just enjoy the book for what it is. So I read that. And I really loved it. And then I also picked this one up. This was also a book club selection. This is one of the Sons of the Caribbean. This is The Mambo Kings Play Songs of Love by Oscar Hijuelos. Oscar Hijuelos is an American. His family is from Cuba. I did a reel yesterday where I showed you this book that I got from the library. Oh, here's my Dollar Tree receipt that's still stuck in the book. This is a really old copy, and I love it. You don't often find these kinds of books in the library anymore. And then this one, it had a little inscription. I thought it was an inscription inside. It said Havana, Cuba, 1952. Frank Suarez, Club Babalu. But page 358 doesn't have anything to do with Frank Suarez and Club Babalu. So I don't think those two things are connected, because page 358 is written in pen and the other thing is written in pencil. But it's just really interesting to find that in there. You get so much character from reading these old books. So the story centers on the lives of two brothers who are musicians in Cuba. And in about 1949, I think, they leave Cuba and come to the United States of America. And what it's like trying to forge a musical career during that time. They're Cuban, they play mambo music. They both seem to be very gifted musicians. But one of them focuses on composing, and he composes a lot of music. And one of them is trying to refine the music. So he's not producing a lot of music, but what he's working on is perfecting it. So one is producing and one is perfecting, and I really enjoy the difference between them. There are a lot of similarities between these two brothers, and there's a point where they don't seem to see the separation between them. seem to see each other. They seem to see each other as like a part of themselves. And so even in this book, we struggle sometimes to separate the two characters. So the story is told in a lot of flashback experiences that both of these brothers have, but also interspersed with narration from the son of one of these brothers, who, as he is growing up and is spending more time with his uncle, learns to see his father in a different light. So the life of the musician is really highlighted in this book. A lot of highs, like meeting Desi Arnaz and appearing on the I Love Lucy show, but also a lot of lows, like the transiency of just, you know, living that gig life for a while. The inability sometimes to maintain a good family life because of all the things that need to be done around the music. We focus on some of that transiency. There's a lot of adult descriptions, relationship descriptions, more than I was comfortable reading. But if you can read around all of those descriptions, then this is a really powerful read as well. So another book that I read from a son of the Caribbean. I was also really happy to read this because we don't get a lot of books by Cuban authors, especially books that are widely available in English translation. So very happy to have found this one and read it, and I liked it. I like a lot of things about it. You know, like I said, the adult descriptions, they were a little too much for me. But I know that doesn't bother everyone. So yeah, those are the books that I read in October. Finished 8 things. Also continuing a couple of books that I started and didn't finish. So more videos like this I hope will be coming very soon, and I hope you join me for them. Would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Let me know what you've read recently. What is the best thing that you read in October? And you know, what are some of the reading challenges that you're participating in November? I'm reading for Nonfiction November. We have the Run Right Reads book club as well. And I have some buddy reads that are scheduled. So I have a lot of reading projects that are on the go. I'm also planning to participate in a couple of other kinds of projects, like I'm gonna be trying to continue with my journaling, but I'm also trying to work on the NaNoWriMo project this year. I've done it with varying levels of success in previous years, so we'll see how that goes. I hope to share all of that with you, so let me know if you're here for this kind of content, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy reading. Bye.